Welcome in on this Tuesday, and what a week of college football action we have in front of us. We just got done previewing and really talking about the weekend we just saw, reacting to everything. We talked yesterday about winners, losers. We talked about the Heisman. We talked about what surprised us, but now it's time to turn our attention to the next week, a week which could absolutely shake up college football. And that's exactly what we need to talk about. Though we don't have the college football playoff rankings, we are going to talk about them as they come out later this evening. As you're hopping in here, hop down into the comments. Let me know whether you think there's going to be any change in the college football playoff rankings. I'll go ahead and pull the Band-Aid off. Personally, I think they're going to be exactly the same as we have previously seen them. Hopefully, Washington jumps to number 4, just because I think they deserve to be there. They have the ranked win over Oregon, which by the committee's own admittance would be the best ranked win of the top 4 teams. And I think that should carry some weight. That's neither here nor there. We have got a lot to talk about today. And I want to start today off with a conversation we had yesterday talking about the Heisman. Though the Heisman is a few weeks out, there has been a lot of conversation online about who deserves to win this award. Should it be Marvin Harrison? Should it be Bo Nix? Should it be Penix? Should it be Jaden Daniels? Now, the other day, something on Twitter caught my attention. And as those of you who are in here may be aware, I'm probably not as active as I should be on Twitter. But one of the reasons I'm not as active as I should be on Twitter and social media in general are just some of those environments where you see some things that just make you kind of dip your head in shame and wonder, how in the world did we arrive here? And the take I saw was that Jaden Daniels would be holding clipboards at Oregon and he would be holding clipboards at Washington. Now, this isn't to detract from Michael Penix. This isn't to detract from Bo Nix, but you would have a real hard case to make that Jaden Daniels is not the Heisman frontrunner right now. When you look, he leads almost every major category. And when I'm asking myself who does the most for their team, Jaden Daniels has a defense that ranks outside the top 100 in college football. They are winning games because Jaden Daniels is taking wins. He has proven to be one of the hardest players in the entire sport to stop. Just go back and watch that Alabama game, where if he wasn't getting it done with his arm, he was getting it done with his legs. He is truly a unique talent to try and stop. He is deadly in the deep game, efficient in the intermediate, very efficient in the short, and he has got an uncanny ability to recognize when it's time to tuck and run and how to do so successfully. So trying to act like that he would hold a clipboard at Oregon and Washington, I find to be facetious. I think he and Michael Penix would have a fantastic quarterback competition, as would he and Bo Nix. But trying to pretend like it would be a foregone conclusion that he would not come out on top of either one of those quarterback competitions, to me, makes absolutely no sense. To quote a UFC fighter, y'all must have forgot, right? Y'all must have forgot. And I bring that up because Jaden Daniels at Arizona State was fantastic his first year. When he hopped on the scene as a true freshman, many people around college football, including myself, perked up and were like, this kid right here is someone you need to watch. Now, subsequent years at Arizona State didn't end up as well as his first year, but it would later come out all the chaos, all the turmoil that clouded Arizona State during those years. After he hit the transfer portal, he arrived at LSU, and the rest is quite frankly history, where we're seeing him get touchdowns after touchdown after touchdown and proving week in, week out that he is one of the premier athletes in the game of college football. Pretending like he would just be minced meat at either of those institutions, being Oregon and Washington, didn't sit right with me. What didn't sit right with me either is further on down into this comment thread, or the same person who put out that tweet that Jaden Daniels wouldn't start at Oregon or he wouldn't start at Washington. He would hold clipboards. His reasoning for Jaden Daniels not winning the Heisman is that while Michael Penix was playing Oregon State, Jaden Daniels was playing Georgia Southern. And that drove me up a wall. The reason why that infuriated me so much is because it takes me back to something we learn as we grow up. We learn this concept as children, and that is object permanence. Just because Jaden Daniels was playing Georgia Southern last Saturday doesn't discount what he did against some of the best teams in college football. one of the best defenses in college football. I think if you look at the advanced metrics, Alabama's defense is surging. It's one of the top units in the game. And Jaden Daniels proved during that game he's one of the best players in the nation. He's faced tougher defenses than has Michael Penix and Bo Nix, and to try and just write him off based on him playing Georgia Southern 1 week out of an entire football season, that felt like as close to bad faith argumentation as I have seen. And so I kind of wanted to kick this off today talking about the Heisman because I believe, and not that I have any say in it, Jaden Daniels is the name right now that is leading the Heisman charge. He is the guy that is doing so much for his team, and he has got a team that relies on him. That defense is, quite frankly, awful at LSU. So this is an interesting conversation to have. You're talking about a very talented quarterback going up against very other talented quarterbacks. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., who is a very talented wide receiver. And the only reason why I can't in full confidence just say, hey, give it to Marvin Harrison Jr., is because there are other wide receivers in college football that have comparable numbers. And that's not a slight at Marvin Harrison Jr. Make no mistake about it. I think we as college football fans are absolutely treated with some of the talent at the wide receiver position. But I cannot in good faith give an award to someone, even if I think they're the number one wide receiver in the nation, when their production isn't head and shoulders over the rest of the competition. So the Heisman is something I'm always very excited to talk about, always really excited when this time of the year comes around. But that argument on Twitter just really fired me up the other day that Jaden Daniels would hold clipboards at Washington and Oregon. The guy plays against serious level defenses and he holds his own. He is a very talented player, and to write him off as just some afterthought was just an injustice, in my opinion. Mike in the comments saying, roll blue, take it. You're going for Michigan this weekend against Ohio State. We're going to talk about that because this weekend provides all teams vying for the college football playoff a little bit of a unique opportunity. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to segue into the big picture before we get really specific and start talking about some of these games. Whenever we talk about the college football playoff rankings, I don't think it's any stranger that I have had my complaints with the way the committee has continued to lay down these rankings. In fact, it makes absolutely no sense. We've talked about this time and time again. The fact that Oregon is the highest one-loss team makes no sense to me. The highest ranked one-loss team should either be Alabama or Texas. Texas has got the great case because they have the head-up win against Alabama. But if you're not going to give it to Texas, it should be Alabama. And if you're not going to give it to either of those, I really don't see the argument for Oregon. And this is coming from somebody who has supported Oregon all this season. I think they're a fantastic football team. But the truth of the matter is that the College Football Playoff Committee is supposed to take a holistic approach in picking the best teams. Their argument for Oregon was that, oh, well, they beat a Utah team, and that was only one of a few teams they've played all year with a winning record. Texas and Alabama have a far more impressive schedule with teams that are actually ranked by the committee's own rankings, and they've beaten them. In a lot of cases, they've beaten them handedly. If we look at Alabama, Alabama has dispatched every ranked team they've played by double digits outside of Texas. That should mean something. Yet to the committee, it hasn't. But one of the reasons why every time I get a little bit fired up about the rankings, so many people come in here and say, hey, it will sort itself out, is because of a weekend like this. We look across college football, and there are some marquee games. You're talking about Oregon State, Oregon, which could shake up the college football playoff rankings. You're talking about Ohio State, Michigan, which will shake up the college football playoff rankings. You're talking about Texas and Texas Tech. I understand a game that from the outside looking in, easy to say that Texas will win that game. And I'll be forthright, I have Texas winning that game. But let's not just write that off. Tech is a team that was talking a lot about running the Big 12, and now they have a little bit of a unique opportunity to get one on Texas before the Horns head to the SEC. Do I think it's likely? No. But I also think that it's college football, and we see unlikely things happen all the time, and I bet your bottom dollar that coaching staff at Texas is not preaching to that team, y'all are going to go in there and roll this team. Bet you that Bo Davis, Steve Sarkisian, and them guys are sitting there saying, this is a serious team. They can beat you. You must be prepared, because that's what good coaching staffs do. You look, the Iron Bowl, absolutely could shake up the college football playoff rankings because every game that Alabama has played since that Texas game has been a quasi college football playoff game. It is a must-win situation. And now, not only is it a must-win situation, we're going to talk about why this game is a little bit unique in a little bit. Then you talk about Florida State, Florida, especially with Jordan Travis not being there. Florida's a team that has talent. That's not the question. When you look at their recruiting classes, the talent they've been able to assemble, and certainly the state in which they reside, being obviously Florida, it's one of the most talent-rich areas in the nation, and the Gators have been able to benefit from a lot of that talent, yet the Gators season has not gone as advertised. And I'm not sitting here claiming that they're as talented as a team as Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia, but they also aren't a team devout of talent. And they have had some hard losses this year. But now you're talking about them playing Florida State, a little bit of a rivalry game, a game where bragging rights in the state are on the line. And if you're Billy Napier, you have an opportunity to get a big win. You have an opportunity to quell some of the fire around you because make no mistake, that Florida Gators fan base, they are not a patient bunch. They want results. And part of the reason why they're not patient, they look in the SEC and they see two Titans. They see two Titans that are able to look at college football national championship aspirations every single season, and nobody can call those aspirations unreasonable. Those two Titans being Alabama, Georgia. There's no way over the past few years that you can look at an Alabama fan nor a Georgia fan if they say, oh, well, our goal this year is a national championship. You can't look at them and say that's not rooted in reality. Those teams right there have been the beacon of consistency in college football. What Georgia is doing right now is unbelievable. Unbelievable. So if you're Billy Napier, you're looking at Florida State and understanding this is an opportunity to cool some of the fires around you. No, I don't think Billy Napier will be fired after this year for several reasons. I am of the mindset that a coach needs at least 3 seasons before we ever even get to that bridge. He needs time to implement his recruiting classes. And famously, the previous coach was let go of Florida after stating, I'll worry about recruiting when the season is over. And as we have a Georgia Bulldogs fan in here, Dixon, glad you're in here with us, but tell me right quick, Dixon, hop down in the comments. How is that going to go in the SEC? If you have a head coach that states, I'll worry about recruiting when the season is over, when you have guys like Kirby Smart and Nick Saban who are going to hit the trail the day after a huge win. They're worried about recruiting 24/7, 365, just as much as they're worried about winning. That's not going to cut it if you're trying to catch Alabama and Georgia. I'll worry about recruiting when the season is over. That basically sealed the deal on the previous coaching staff. So Billy Napier needs his time, but understand that you don't get a lot of time in a lot of cases in the SEC because of what Kirby Smart, because of what Nick Saban have done. Everybody wants to replicate that success, not realizing that success doesn't come often. That success is relegated for a few special coaches, a few special institutions every so many generations. And that's the reality of that situation. So this weekend has the opportunity to provide a lot of chaos. This weekend can make or break the college football playoffs, quite frankly. Teams have got to go out there, handle business, and in some cases, handle business in convincing fashion, which gets me to the first game I want to dive into. Coming off of this weekend, you're going to be seeing a lot of talk on Twitter about a certain SEC team who didn't handle business this past weekend. By and large, the SEC was able to go out and handle business. One team in particular, though, really dropped the ball, and that's Auburn. Because not only did they not win, that happens in college football. You're not going to win every game, but it's who you lost to and how you lost. As Auburn was down by New Mexico State University. And a lot of people have been flaming Auburn on Twitter, on social media, the whole way around. What's interesting about this, though, is everybody understands what this weekend's game is for Alabama. The Alabama Crimson Tide have to go into Jordan-Hare Stadium, a stadium that has been historically difficult to play in if you are Alabama. They have given Alabama fits in Jordan-Hare. I constantly call the stadium cursed, and as Georgia fans can also attest to, weird things happen in Jordan-Hare. Things that just you have no explanation for tend to happen, which makes the games really memorable, to be fair. But with Auburn losing that game to New Mexico State, we talked about this last night on the live stream. Shout out to Jance because he brought up a really interesting point and we dove into it, that now Alabama has got to win and beat Auburn convincingly in order to get the style points that they need to convince the committee, if they win out the rest of the way, if they are to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, they deserve to be into the college football playoffs. They must get style points. We all know what the Iron Bowl is. We know what these rivalry games are. Games where conventional wisdom goes out the door. How many times have we seen a team that we thought was exponentially the better team in the Iron Bowl win in close margins or flat out lose? It's one of the beautiful things about rivalry games. But this Iron Bowl in particular is incredibly important to the Crimson Tide, because the committee is going to expect Alabama to work Auburn. Whether that's the right way to look at it or not, that's going to be the expectation from the committee, because Auburn just lost to New Mexico State University. And so if you're the committee, you're thinking in your head, well, if Alabama is to be one of the 4 best teams in the nation, they too should go in there and roll Auburn. But we know that rivalry games rarely work like that. So this is an interesting situation for Alabama, a game where you already had to win and win convincingly. Now you have to do so in even greater fashion because of the way Auburn just lost to New Mexico State. And if you're sitting there thinking, Ty, that's not fair, I don't think that the way Auburn lost to New Mexico State should have any bearing in the way that Alabama plays them. I agree with you that that's how it should work. Unfortunately, the College Football Playoff Committee has shown us with the way they've currently laid out these rankings, that's not the way they're viewing it. The way that it should be and the way that it is are not the same right now. I completely agree with you. If you're sitting in here saying, Ty, that's ridiculous. It shouldn't matter if Alabama beats Auburn by 1 touchdown or 3 touchdowns. If they win, that should be what matters. At the end of the day, winning is most important. Let's get that understood. That right there doesn't matter. That right there is a universal truth. But I also believe it is an unfortunate truth that you have got to win in convincing fashion, not only because the committee has demanded that even before Auburn lost to New Mexico State, but now especially because Auburn lost to New Mexico State. Now you have got to leave no doubt if you're Alabama. You have got to go in there and roll them. And the reason why I say the committee is looking for that, simply look at Oregon. Whenever the committee was explaining why Oregon is ahead of Texas, why Oregon is ahead of Alabama, they didn't point to a strength of schedule. They didn't point to individual games. What they pointed to was that Oregon had beaten Utah. At the time, was the only other team outside of Washington that Oregon had played with a winning record all year. The committee said Oregon beat Utah and they have one of the best offenses and defenses in the nation. How do they attain that ranking? Because they've been putting it on teams. They'll be up by 4 touchdowns in the 4th quarter, still throwing fades because they've been earning style points. When you looked at Alabama and Texas, the committee said, well, these 2 teams have the most ranked wins of any teams vying for the college football playoffs, yet that's not good enough because we're going to give the nod to the style points of Oregon over the resume of both Texas and Alabama. The committee has already been forthright in how they view style points. Whether we agree with it or not, that's insignificant, unfortunately. I disagree with that premise entirely. On its very existence, I disagree with that premise. It goes against what college football has largely been about and what it's supposed to be about, meritocracy. Yet the committee is saying win convincingly, and that's more important than winning against good competition. So Alabama has a task in front of them this weekend. You've got to beat your rival, but it's not just about beating your rival. It's about dominating your rival. So how can Alabama do this? Well, luckily, if you're a Crimson Tide fan, there was a soundbite that came out this week that I was excited to hear. And that was Malachi Moore. And he has provided several phenomenal sound bites this year, and he has been sensational for that Alabama defense this year. A true bright spot. He was talking about how he didn't listen to Nick Saban's 24-hour rule this time. That they beat Chattanooga on Saturday, and Nick Saban typically has a 24-hour rule. Enjoy the win for 24 hours, and then it's back to the process. He said after that game, he went, and as soon as Auburn was done, he started watching film on Auburn. There wasn't any 24-hour rule. The second it was available, it was back to the grind. Malachi Moore is also the same player who earlier in the year stated after that Texas loss and really during that Ole Miss game, it clicked with the team that they were already in the college football playoffs, per se. They were already in the playoffs because if they lost a game, it was done. Every game was single game elimination for the Crimson Tide after that Texas loss. If you want to make the playoffs, you can have no more hiccups. And personally, I think Alabama is being penalized for the close loss to USF more than they're being penalized for the loss to Texas. That's the only way you can explain Oregon being ahead of Alabama or Texas to me, is that it's not that Alabama lost to Texas. It's that Alabama had a close win against USF. In my estimation, Alabama's being penalized for that. Take that how you will. So the Crimson Tide have got to win and win in convincing fashion. Whether we agree with this point or not, unfortunately, it is the reality that the College Football Playoff Committee has laid forward. And because of that, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide do. If we look at this offense right now, the Crimson Tide's offense has evolved maybe more than any other offense in college football this year in terms of the use of pre-snap motion, in terms of the use of some different packages, and in terms of Jalen Milroe's growth from where he was week 1, week 2 to where he is now. It has been a phenomenal journey. It has been an incredibly exciting journey. Whether you're a fan of Alabama or not, if you're a real big fan of college football, at some level, I think you can even admit you've had a lot of fun watching it. It's fun to watch these players who work their whole lives towards something, give so much towards something, have success. That's awesome. I mean, that's what this is all about, no? So Alabama has an opportunity because their offense is really starting to come alive. They can put it on Auburn in a few different ways. The Alabama rush attack is becoming really varied in terms of using Jalen Milroe and in terms of using the running backs they have. The use of 12 personnel is increasing, and I think that's where Alabama is at its best, when they are using 12 personnel, because they have the ability to generate some mismatches with their tight ends. Amari Niblack is a really interesting player, someone I continue to talk about. And then we talk about Alabama's defense, where whenever we look at the Chattanooga game, Chattanooga was able to get more success than I think a lot of people were comfortable with. But when I went back and watched how they were able to generate that success, I think a lot of it stems from Alabama not having arguably one of the best players on their defense, Deontay Lawson. Because I think Chattanooga really effectively attacked where Deontay Lawson wasn't. And in times, Jahad Campbell, as it was pointed out on the show after the game on the Bama Standard, he is an incredibly talented linebacker, but he's used to having his running mate, Deontay Lawson, there. And I think that showed. So Alabama's defense, I think, has the recipe. This Auburn team is really good at moving the ball on the ground. And I have long held the notion you're going to have a real tough day if you walk into a stadium against Nick Saban or Kirby Smart and your plan to beat them is by running it down their throat. Nick Saban and Kirby Smart will laugh all the way to the bank if you're saying we're going to try and run it down your throat, or at least historically speaking, it just doesn't work. If you're going to beat that style of defense, and I lump those two together a lot of the times because let's be honest, if I'm talking about the Saban defense, I'm talking about the Kirby Smart defense, they're so close to one another. Largely, we can have the same conversation. If you're going to beat that defense, test them deep. You have got to get those defensive backs to respect the deep ball. They have got to back up. Because if they don't think, if Alabama's defense has no respect for your deep ball, they're going to pin their ears back, and it's going to be a long night. They are going to send the wolves. Same with Georgia. If they don't respect the deep ball, they're going to pin their ears back, and they're going to send the wolves. And it's going to be a tough night for the opponent. They're going to eat. We have so many sample sizes of this. So Alabama-Auburn, I think, is a must-watch game this weekend, not only because it's the Auburn Bowl, but because of the College Football Playoff Committee, how they've structured the rankings. And they basically told everybody, Alabama's got to win big. Can't wait to hear from all of you, not only as you're in here now, but as you come in here later. Let me know what you're thinking. We're going to hit some comments. Dixon saying, three-peat loading. Hey, man, y'all have got as good of an opportunity as anybody to win it. Georgia is an incredibly talented team. I've talked about this previously. I think that in a roundabout way, and Brock Bowers going down made the offense almost take a step back, take a deep breath, and then being like, okay, so arguably the best player in college football just went down with injury. What do we still have? And then they looked around them and realized that we're still armed to the teeth. We still have weapon after weapon after weapon. And it almost had that offense take a step back, once again, deep breath, and be like, okay, let's get back to basic form football. And they were really effective. Really effective. They laid it on Florida, and they have not looked back ever since. Very good team. Very good team. That's a dumb head coach. Talking about Mullen, yeah, about recruiting. That's why the dogs and Bama stay on top. Yeah, listen, what those guys do isn't normal, right? It's not normal. The grind that they have, it's just it's wild. Good content. So I appreciate that, Dixon. I'm a fellow content creator, mostly live streams, play by play for Dogs, Hawks, Braves, and Falcons. Keep up the great work. Appreciate that, man. Thank you for hopping in here. And yeah, as a content creator, you know what it is, man. I can't imagine doing all those other teams. I just stick to college football, and that is a lot. I can't imagine doing college football, all those other sports. I know that you stay busy. He says Georgia struggled for a half against Auburn in Auburn. Jordan Hare. They get up for their rivals. So true. So true. And here's something I will give Auburn. I don't typically hand out compliments to Auburn, but I will give credit where it's due. That fan base, even when Auburn is bad, they show up, man. Like, they show up. Whether the team shows up or not, usually that stadium shows up. FSU will not make it in with Travis getting hurt. Dogs, winner of OSU, UM. Yep. Washington. I think Washington should be ahead of Florida State already, Dixon. And here's why. The College Football Playoff Committee, when saying Oregon is the best one-loss team in the nation, who beat Oregon? Washington. So if Oregon's the best one-loss team in the nation, then how in the world is Florida State ahead of them when Florida State's marquee win is LSU? And if LSU is valued so highly, then how come Alabama hasn't moved from 8 for beating LSU? It makes fundamentally no sense. But Florida State, Louisville, that's going to be a game. If, that's what we get in the ACC championship, that's going to be something to watch. And then you have Florida State, Florida. That's going to be a really interesting game. A lot of top 10, 15 need a statement game. True, Matt, true. Are you in shock about USC being straight dog shit? Yeah, a little, Matt. A little. And let's understand this. It's because this is largely the same team Lincoln had last year. I don't think that there's any question that out of every year Riley has coached, this is by far and about the most disappointing year in college football. Now, as you will attest, Matt, even though I didn't think USC would be this bad, I thought USC would be competing. I think I had Washington ultimately winning it. I had USC competing for a Pac-12 championship. I thought they'd be right there. I'll own it. They're all on the previous live, so it's easy to go and find my previous takes. But I think that sounds about right, Matt, that I had USC vying for a Pac-12 championship. Even though I had that, you will remember, because I remember you being in here and you asking some really good questions about my view on USC. I'd started to really talk about some of the changes that needed to occur. Obviously, I've been on the Grinch train, right? I mean, before this season, I talked about what it takes to win a national championship. Since 2000, the worst defense to win a college football national championship, 2010 Auburn coming in at number 54. Outside of that, there are only two other defenses in all of college football since 2000 to win a national championship with a defense that ranks outside the top 20. So the three teams that have done that, 2010 Auburn coming in at 54, 2019 LSU coming in at, I believe, 32nd. It's been about 2 months since I've looked, so don't hold me to that. And 2014 Ohio State, which I believe came in at 23rd. So I already knew, right, before this season, it's like, okay, well, USC, your ceiling might be competing for a Pac-12 championship. I don't like your odds in a college football playoff game because I don't think you've improved your defense enough from year 1 to year 2 to be able to win that. And I certainly don't like your odds at a national championship. Well, in fairness, Matt, up until this point, that was a logical take. Up until this point, that was a completely logical take. He took a team in last year's USC team and competed for a college football playoff spot and took the same team this year and did significantly worse. Right? So that's why I always said I thought they'd be competing for a Pac-12 championship. I thought if they made the college football playoffs, they'd get worked, and I certainly didn't have them competing for a national championship. But up until this year, we can say, hey, we don't like how he does this. We don't like how he does that. All of those points, while true, were ultimately proven moot until it came to a head. And now you're 100% right, Matt. You're 100% right. All those concerns you had eventually came to a head. And now you're 100% right, man. I started identifying them, but I didn't put it together until about halfway through this year. And then at that point, it was like, okay, this is pretty problematic. Not particularly. I mean, listen, we can get into specifics, but at the point where he's winning, 10 games? Like, we can say, oh, well, his offense got 0.5 points worse, or his defense got one position worse, but he was still winning 10 games. So while you're right, we can dive into the nitty gritty and be like, okay, well, they slipped here. At the end of the day, he was still winning. And I completely agree. You're not going to win national championships that way. But I also didn't see this, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Matt. Don't get me. You were certainly onto something. It is, at the end of the day, the Riley MO. But even with the Riley MO, even though we can argue, yes, there was slipping, it was still leading to wins. And then the ultimate collapse happened. And this is different, in fairness. This is a little bit different. So it's a really interesting conversation to have, no doubt about it. But ultimately, Matt, you're 100% right, man. You were right. You were 100% spot on with it. No doubt. USC is a big disappointment, to be honest. USC won't win until Coach Riley can start to recruit defense and hire top-tier defensive coordinators. And on top of that, Dixon, we got to remember this. So what's happening next year? They're going to the Big Ten. I've said this multiple times, Dixon. What other coach in college football would have gotten away with all those quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams, 0 playoff wins? They tried to put heat on Kirby when Kirby lost in the playoffs. And, he was still one of the better coaches in the nation. They tried to say Nick's legacy was tainted last year for losing 2 games by 4 points. So the standard he was held to, I do completely agree. It's a little bit facetious, but yeah, it's, I guess my question is this. Caleb Williams isn't going to be there. You now go to a conference much more known for their defensive play, and the teams that were beating you in the pack, by and large, are following you to the Big Ten. You can't run away from UCLA. You can't run away from Washington. You can't run away from Oregon. Not to mention, now you got to be introduced to teams like Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. I mean, I'm fascinated. I am fascinated to see what happens. I don't think that he is on the hot seat, whereas like he's going to get fired this offseason, but I think that seat is warm. I think next year we're going to be having some really interesting conversations. All right. So some of the other games we're looking at this week to cause some major shakeup, you have the big game and the game, right? Ohio State, Michigan. One of the premier football games every single year. And this is going to be interesting. Michigan came out last week against Maryland and did not look great. Did not look great at all. Came out real hot early on, and then Maryland almost beat them. So going into this game right here, Michigan has beaten Ohio State the previous 2 years. Can Ryan Day get this one back? And you have got to imagine that the entirety of the Ohio State team right now feels some type of way. Because now they feel like every win that Michigan has gotten over them has now been called into question in terms of its validity. And I can't say I necessarily blame them. So can Ohio State get this one back? I actually am going to pick Ohio State to win this game, mainly because there's a lot going on at Michigan right now. There's a lot clouded over them, and they didn't particularly look like world beaters against Maryland. I did not find that to be a compelling win. And previously against Penn State, look, they figured out a way to win against a good team. And I think Michigan is a very talented team. I think Michigan is a very good team. That's not my argument here. But they have been able to bang out some wins in a manner that I don't know that you're going to be able to do against Ohio State. I don't know that if Ohio State, and now granted, Ohio State's got to find themselves and play their best game. It's not going to be easy beating Michigan. Make no mistake, I'm not disenfranchised into thinking Ohio State's going to walk in here and walk Michigan. That's not what I expect to see. I expect this to be a very close game. I just think when we look at this, Michigan has not been tested even close with the level of athlete Ohio State has. Michigan has not experienced anything close yet. And I think when we look at this, Ohio State has got a fantastic defense, and in my opinion, the ability to be more explosive on offense. And I think that right there can be massive. Because ultimately, my biggest question with Michigan, not even this year, my biggest question with Michigan, even going back to last year, why I thought, okay, if they beat TCU, they're not going to beat Georgia. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they're not going to. If you can't be explosive, you're going to have a tough time against some of these top defenses. And I think Michigan is a really talented team, but do I think they're going to be able to get explosive against Ohio State when they struggled to be explosive against Maryland? They can be explosive in their run game. Make no mistake about that. But I'm talking about specifically their passing game. That's got to be an explosive asset. And if it's not, they're asking a lot of their offense. They're asking a lot of their defense. Ultimately, I think Ohio State gets this one back. I think Ohio State is able to get a big win. And I just think that it really boils down to two teams that have good defenses, great defenses. I'll say it, great defenses. I think they do have great defenses. Two teams that have great defenses, but I think one team has the ability to be more explosive than the other. Even if I say, okay, I like Michigan's rushing attack better, which that's hard to argue against, right? When you look at Edwards, when you look at Corum, that's very tough to argue against. I like Travion Henderson a lot at Ohio State. I like Travion Henderson a lot there. They have the ability to be explosive in the run and the pass. So I like Ohio State in this game. Let's hit some comments. I asked the question, should Lincoln Riley resign? I don't think so, Crunch. I don't think so. I think as much questions as I have about Lincoln Riley, he also has the ability to answer a lot of questions next year, right? That's the beautiful thing about questions. Their existence creates hesitation, but it also creates an avenue for providing answers. So no, I don't think he should resign. I think that he should come back and try and answer questions. I think that he should come back, no doubt. What's Mayfield? How can Alabama game be a statement game against broken Auburn? Because it's a rivalry game. That's very simple, Matt. It's a rivalry game. This is the same Auburn that played Georgia close, right? Like, saying a broken Auburn team, we could espouse that to most Auburn teams. Auburn is one of those teams, like, we call it Auburning for a reason, because they're going to Auburn. They're going to do some wild things, but then in a game that they should be completely out talented in, they show up and they show out. That's just what Auburn does. And rivalry games are different. 100%. It's the same way that last year, Texas got a big win over Oklahoma. Oklahoma didn't have their starting quarterback. They played a tight end most of the game. I think a lot of Texas fans felt that was a statement game because it's a rivalry game, right? It's just one of those things. Want the crybaby. Interesting. I don't know how you came away with that conclusion, Crunch. How is the Iron Bowl a rivalry game in any way except name? Matt, it's one of the best rivalries in college football, man. That's what do you mean? How is it a rivalry game? The history of the Iron Bowl is as deep as any rivalry in college football. That'd be like asking how Ohio State and Michigan is a rivalry game, or how is Texas and Oklahoma a rivalry game. Like, it's one of the biggest long-standing rivalry games in the nation. It is absolutely a competitive game. You look, it is not this year. Says who? That's a ridiculous take, Matt. Like, that is not even founded in reason, fact, nothing. I'm sorry, that's a ridiculous take. That couldn't be further from the truth. Absolutely not. 2017, Alabama undefeated goes into Auburn in the Iron Bowl, a game that they should win handily. Auburn beats them. How many times in the past have we seen an Auburn team that many people think are dead in the water, and yet they still manage to compete in the Iron Bowl because this game is different? 100%. No, this is absolutely still a rivalry game. It's not a rivalry game because you don't think it is, right? Like, the facts don't support the position. The history of the game doesn't support your position. I guess my question is, what principled reason do you have that it's not a rivalry game outside of Auburn broken? Because that's not going to cut it. Rivalry games aren't built nor destroyed on 1 year, Matt. That's facetious. That doesn't work. That would fundamentally make it not a rivalry game if it was built or destroyed in 1 year. They're built over time. Much like rivers, much like mountains, the water comes down and carves out something. Well, the water has carved out one of the most influential rivalries in all of college football, Iron Bowl. Georgia versus Alabama is a rivalry game. They don't play every year. How could that be? Sure, it's two of the biggest names in college football going after each other, but they don't play every year. So how can that be a rivalry? Just because it's the two best teams in the nation, I don't think that automatically makes it a rivalry. Yes, they're both in the SEC, but they don't play each other every year. Yes, there is a chippiness between the fan base because it's like two behemoths recognizing you're a giant, I'm a giant. There's really only other one or two teams in our class, right? Like, Bama and Georgia are in a class of their own. So in that aspect, sure. I mean, because they really don't have many equals, but they don't play each other every year. It's a great series. Now, if you would have told me Alabama LSU, that is becoming a new rivalry. Yeah, no, you'd have had me on that one. That is becoming a new rivalry. Nick Saban leaves LSU after winning a national championship. Les Miles comes in there and wins a national championship with the players Nick Saban still has. Nick Saban goes to Alabama in no time at all, wins a national championship in the same conference, in the same division, and they play each other every single year. Not only do they play each other every single year, but for one of Alabama's national championships, you had what was called, for a lot of people, an incredible game in Auburn, Alabama that ended up being 6-9, where neither team scored a touchdown, all field goals. LSU wins that game. They go on to the national championship against Alabama, and Alabama doesn't let them pass the 50-yard line but one time. That you'd have had me. But Georgia versus Bama, just because they're two teams that almost have no equals, doesn't make it inherently a rivalry. It's just two behemoths playing. Right? Like, I understand the premise of, like, Georgia versus Bama, two massive names, but the Iron Bowl, man, is one of the best rivalries in the game, arguably the best rivalry in college football. So no, I completely disagree with that take, Matt. I wish it was OU versus Okie Light in the Big 12 title game. I'm interested in seeing the Big 12 because I just think that I don't even know what the Big 12 is doing, Matt. It's embarrassing. The fact that they're trying to figure out the tiebreakers and all of this 2 weeks before the game, it just is a bad look. It's just a bad look to me. No way, Bijan, stop it. I'm talking about Travion Henderson, same class as Bijan. He's also been hurt a lot. I think he's meaning like actual class, like recruiting class that he came out. I think that's what Matt is talking about. Travion Henderson has also just been one of those players where unfortunately, oh no, he was a little bit after Bijan. Was he the class after Bijan? In any case, he is a very talented running back. He's just been hurt a lot. Yeah, Bijan was the class before Travion Henderson. Bijan was 2020. Henderson was 21. Sooners roll tide. Hey, Oklahoma's got a great opportunity to get back a game against TCU this week. TCU knocking Dylan Gabriel out, and whether Dylan Gabriel plays or not, I know OU fans are very excited about Jackson Arnold. They didn't want Texas or OU in the. It's ridiculous. Listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, DW, so I'm not going to go like, oh, they're trying to hold out this team or this team. What I will say is it's amateur as can be. It's amateur as can be. This is a multi-million-dollar business. And you're telling me you're figuring it out on the fly? Come on. You have an off season. The off season is longer than the damn season. It's ridiculous. It's wild. It's wild. If Dylan isn't 100%, then Jackson needs to start. So true, Matt. So true. 100% DW. 100%. What are we doing? What are we doing? That's the type of thing that needs to be eloquently laid out before the season begins. This is what I don't understand, right? And this is one of the things that coming from like a legal background, one of the things you hear in your classes is bright lines. You're going to hear this phrase bright lines all the time. And it's basically saying like, hey, we put these parameters on whatever issue it is, and there is a bright line where something is not a violation, something is not illegal until you cross this bright line. And once you cross that bright line, it's illegal. They call it a bright line. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. A line in the sand that's very bright, that everybody can see it, everybody can understand it. That's a bright line, in my opinion. The structure of our conference championship and how we decide it. That's a bright line. That needs to be decided and understood by every single team before the season starts. That way, everybody has their expectations in order. If we're going to make the Big 12 championship, this is what we must do. It is a disservice to the teams that are in your league to 2 weeks before, as you said, DW, 2 weeks before the regular season is, it's like, oh, well, now we're switching it up. How can anybody have any expectation if they don't know where they even stand? It's wild. And I must admit, the Big 12 dropped the ball with Texas and Oklahoma. But then I thought the Big 12 did some pretty good business moves in acquiring the teams from the pack that they acquired. I thought that they did a really good job in acquiring teams from the pack in order to try and keep the Big 12 afloat. Now, am I saying that the teams they acquired equal Texas and Oklahoma? Absolutely not. You're talking about two of the top 10 brands in college football. Let's get real here. But they did get interesting teams. Like, I'm a college football nerd. Let's get that understood. Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, and BYU now in the Big 12. That's awesome to me. I mean, that's so cool to me. Cincinnati, UCF, Houston. Come on. I'm there. I'm so excited about that. So I love the moves they did there. But come on, this is amateur at best, deciding it 2 weeks before. The commish did this. He drew his line at the beginning of the year. He did, man, but this is just a different level. Like, I take it, DW, you're Texas or OU fan. I take it you're one or the other. See, I'm a fan of an SEC team. So I'm looking at this from the outside looking in. And so I have no like conspiratorial mindset. The only mindset I have is just like, this is bad business. This is bad practice. This is amateur. This is ridiculous. Now, that being said, DW, based on the events that I have seen, even though I always maintain I'm not a conspiratorial person, I sympathize with Texas and Oklahoma fans because what I've seen from the way that the commissioner has talked, I don't think that it's like, the worst thing in the world, but I also just have sat there and been like, buddy, what is going on? That mixed with this, it's just like, guys, I see why Texas and Oklahoma jumped to the SEC. Because can you imagine Greg Sankey doing this? I can't. The SEC decided to put a pause on their situation because they're like, no, we need an entire offseason to figure this out. The Big 12 said, screw it, full send. We'll figure this out on the fly. Oh, no, listen, that's why I said, Matt, that is exactly why I said I'm not conspiratorial, but the fact that I can probably tell DW is a Texas or an OU fan, and the fact that I don't think he's misguided in his frustrations with the Big 12 completely makes me sympathize with those that think the Big 12 has been out to get Texas and Oklahoma. Even though if I don't think that they've been outright out to get them, I think that the actions that they have laid forth are laughable at best. And I think that it makes it very easy to harbor those feelings if you are a Texas fan, if you are an Oklahoma fan. And that's why I said I completely sympathize with you. Completely. Because I mean, from the outside looking in, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, we got some Utah will run the Big 12. Arizona, hey. Zona is fun, man. Arizona is so much fun this year. They got that young quarterback and they got that wide receiver who are eating. I'm so excited for Arizona. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, guys, that's about it for today. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Just kind of a light stream, talking about some things, talking about the college football playoffs. I'll be on the Bama Standard this evening as we will be talking everything to do with Alabama, Auburn. We will be talking everything to do with possibilities, and we will be talking about the rankings. Steven says Zona is fun, but will Jed stay at Zona? That's the question, man. And that's a legitimate question because you already know teams are going to be after him. With the way they turned it around, with the way they're playing, absolutely. Oh, hey, Matt. Hey, I hear you. But you got to remember, man, I watched an Alabama team that had Dallas Turner and Will Anderson get 0 holding calls called against them all year. Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. And the SEC looked at Alabama and said, no, nobody held them all year. So it's not going to get much better. I know Big 12, isn't great. The SEC officiating is also the same officiating crew that said maybe the best edge duo of the past few years. They didn't get any holds. Nobody held them. Anderson is, I think, leading pressure rate from all rookies in the NFL with a 30% pressure rate. And, yeah. It's an SEC conspiracy. I love it, Matt. I love it. That's great. I'm with you, man. Let's storm the offense. Gattaca. That's so good, man. Ty, we have to feel sorry for Jay. He will be on Bleacher Report while his team is playing. Good job on winning the pick'ems. Well, I almost had a perfect week this weekend, Steven, but Lincoln Riley and USC. I picked them to win because I thought, surely, you're not going to lose every game to end the year, right? Right? No, I was wrong. They did. And it was my one wrong pick of the weekend. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Luckily, they can't disappoint me this weekend. So, there's always that. Guys, we will see you next time. Until then, enjoy your day. Enjoy your Thanksgiving week. Spend it with your family. Spend it watching football. Enjoy your time. That's it. See ya.